ecologists and economists, new definition. This is how valuation happens. This is why I'm saying valuation is a human institution. It needs to be understood as such, and here's physical pictures don't lie, evidence that this is the case. This was an actual choice experiment conducted by Mike Christie and a few others who worked on this some time back on the Solomon Islands. And the way this works is essentially you lay out the choices. You begin with the status quo, as in here's what we have, and you give people two choices. It's always local community because that's the local ecosystem. Two choices. If you do this, this will happen. If you do that, that will happen. Choice A, choice B. And then choice A will lead to a certain series of outputs, which means you get better cash crops, you get some money from the mining community for selling the land, but you don't get access to the forest, you don't get your favorite species, you don't get to get bushmeat, you don't do this. So you get some things, you don't get other things. And then you're supposed to value them. That's the bad job of those economists. Value them by putting a number of stones on the pieces of paper which represent those options, those choices. And those stones represent value. And then you total up the stones and see which choice is more valuable. And then based on that, your community decides what is the right way forward. So essentially, that's the whole way of getting deliberative choice to be expressed in terms of value, not money terms, but in terms of relative value. This has got 3 stones, this has got 5 stones, this choice has got only 1 stone. And those choices actually depend on what season it is. Time zone. So this is actually a full-scale community SGA and T process underway. This is how it works at the community level. So pictures of economists, ecologists, administrators all getting together. I'm just kidding, but this is true. Pictures don't lie. This is what's going on. So the message I'm getting here is that if you want to take valuation down to the level of the community, there are ways of doing it. It doesn't involve money. It involves getting community engagement, and it's still valuation. And that's how the deliberative choice experiments work, which we are written about. Basically, program A is B and C are, like in this case, 3 choices. There's a status quo, and then there's a program A, B, and C. And those different programs with different program means choice, that yes, you give up the forest, you give mining rights, you get some income, you don't get other things. Or you don't give it up. Then you will get your GUE is one plant that they consume. Then there's water quality which is high in one case, which is conservation case, but very low in the other cases because the mining companies have taken it away. In some cases you have food, in some cases you have better cocoa, and the stones represent like the value that people attach to having or not having one or the other. And it does make a difference when you do this. It does make a difference from community to community, and I think what this is illustrating is that truly if you want to take valuation down to the community, you've got to recognize the first thing that I said about valuation, that it is a human institution. This is not about just operating in the economic stratosphere of spreadsheets and formulae. This is about working with people. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the basic point that I'm trying to make here. Valuation is a human institution. There are many, many ways of valuing. I'm sure that the speakers after me will cover contingent valuation and will cover travel cost method and the various types of travel costs. Those are also very useful. After all, if I took this method to the people of New York City and asked them to work through it, they'd laugh at me. But the point is, equally, will the villagers laugh at me if I take them spreadsheets? Right? So you've got to be appropriate in the way that you are devising valuation methodology when you talk to people in different countries, in different contexts. It all depends on which community you're with. Is it a bunch of business people in New York, or is it economists and ecologists in Solomon Islands, as I call them? Anyway, that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much, and I'm open to Q&A now. We've run out of time, but there's a list of the kind of methodological challenges that people face in doing evaluation at the community level and the kind of practical challenges people face. So maybe if you distribute this presentation around, it becomes a discussion topic afterwards. But these are all listed, and some of them are kind of obvious, so some of these need a bit in terms of what kind of challenges you will face if you go about conducting things like distributed choice experiments around local community areas.
Just to say, all of the information will be available on the internet.
You have time to stay with us for a few more minutes to answer some questions, maybe. Any questions? Looking into the
Thank you for your presentation. It was very clear. However, I may ask you a question. For these valuation studies, are social scientists associated with this research, or economists, or purely disciplinary?
No, it's multidisciplinary. I mean, if you look at TEEB is a good example because it's a large collection of people who are involved. Our chapter on valuation, chapter 4 in TEEB Ecological and Economic Foundations, was lead authored by Eduardo Gonzizio. He's basically a social anthropologist. He works with Indiana at Indiana's University. So I mean, the mix of skills that you need for valuation is actually quite wide. It goes all the way from being policy experts to being social anthropologists to being economists, ecologists, and so on. And we are also conscious that, sorry, I forgot to mention this, but since you just reminded me that there is something called a TEEB approach, a process basically. Is somebody covering that, or should I spend a few minutes talking about it?
So you sort of discussed the use of assessment process.
Okay, so that's connected. So when we say TEEB approach, what we are saying is very much a policy-oriented approach towards valuation. And what we advise is that the first step towards going through a country TEEB is actually to have a stakeholders conference where you get people together to express what are the key policy priorities. And the policy priorities in some places would be poverty alleviation, in some places it could be fisheries restocking, in some places it could be desertification, in some places it could be freshwater problems, or in some places it could be all of the above. In some places it could be just alternative livelihoods. But you need to write down clearly what are the policy objectives that you as a state or a province or a community are trying to achieve. And then, having written that down, you then go on to say, okay, so which ecosystem services are going to make a difference in implementing this or that policy objective for this or that policy priority. So clearly, if one of your policy priorities is desertification, then the ecosystem service of water retention by forest biomass is quite important. So you better write that down, and so on. So if your policy is poverty alleviation, then you have to ensure that there are the flows of nutrients and to residential farmers and subsistence farmers, and the flow of non-timber forest products continues, otherwise the poor will get poorer. So you need to write that down. So making that, starting with the policies, you go to a list of what are the ecosystem services that are important. Once you've done that, then you say, okay, so where do these come from? Like which biomes are they coming from? And then you start the valuation process. Then you identify the universal ecosystem services and biomes which provide them, which are relevant for your particular valuation exercise. So don't just begin, okay, I want to value nature, or I want to do my state. No, that's not the way forward. Say, what policies are you concerned about? Right? And if the answer is that there is not a single policy which has any relevance, which has zero impact from any ecosystem services, then please don't do a valuation exercise. The answer is don't do it. Right? But I challenge anyone to start with a list of policy priorities and come and tell me that actually not a single ecosystem services is relevant to any of these. I challenge anyone. You just go try it out, see what they say.
Okay, one more question and one more over there.
Thank you. One of the, not really the conclusion, but your point is about the refusals of the trade-offs. Would you please clarify why you don't use sort of trade-offs in this analysis? Thank you.
I'm assuming people are not all economists here, so I didn't use it. But I mean, when I give that very simple example of the Solomon Island community, when you go back to the slide, they are exercising a trade-off choice. So go back.
There.
So this is basically a trade-off. So by attaching values to what outputs they prefer, as in do they want gue and water more, or do they want food gardens more, or cocoa more, and depending on which circumstance. That's kind of a trade-off because deforestation will give them less gue, less water, but it will give them more food gardens and more cocoa gardens. So they are trading off in that sense. But clearly you can see that depending on how the program is constructed, the trade-off choice is different. The value of those trade-offs is different. This is as evaluated by the very basic small community that we're talking about. So trade-offs do come into place. Trade-offs are basically a question of weighing costs versus benefits, or weighing two sets of benefits versus each other. And that's what you trade off. You trade off the choice.
You want to respond to that, or because we have one more question
I
here?
just want to say that you will get to give you a little exercise so you can try those with that choice sets. So you will get to see what it means to create confidence.
Great. So you have an actual sort of a working text example. That's great. Thanks.
You had
I was a little bit confused on this table because of the presence of costs allocated on the table. It's very tablesome. So one will look at it and think that some cost is allocated on the services that this ecosystem provides to the community and things like that. So I don't know if it's relevant to have costs when you do this evaluation.
No, so each program has a cost. I mean, there's the money paid out for the program, but then you get some benefits for it, and the benefits are different depending on whether it's. I don't exactly know which was program A. I presume looking at it that it would be conversion of a lot of forests into cocoa gardens. Therefore, you get a lot of value from cocoa, but you don't get much value of goel because you're losing that, and so on. So they're different. The cost would be whatever it costs to plant that program A, program B, program C. And I mean, looking at this, it looks like the original state is probably a cocoa garden because clearly there's zero cost in doing that. So it's both costs and benefits.
It doesn't happen that often that we are an opportunity to spend some time with you and discuss this issue. So I do want to give the opportunity for maybe one more question, but we do have to move on with the program also. Is there one more question? Yes, I kind of paved the way for myself to be able to ask the last question. That was convenient. I was just wondering, you mentioned most of those evaluation studies are done by ecological economists. I was just wondering, because most of the decisions made in policy and at the business community are still kind of inspired by neoclassical economics. And after the deep study finished, you spent time at Harvard teaching a course on the field. I was just wondering to what extent these concepts of ecological economics are now slowly being picked up in more neoclassical teaching at the university.
Yeah, sadly, Dolph too slowly, in my opinion, because even at Yale, I found the great support from the program came from the School of Forestry and Environmental Services, Yale Fair Service called. And the economists don't want to hear about it because it's kind of unsettling. But I don't, and it's sometimes as simple as, I've got my lecture, I've done it 15 times, why should I change it because one Mr. Sukhdev comes along and says different. It's like basic human resistance to change, which is at the professor level as well in Yale and Harvard. So that these are the small things that we have to fight.
Yeah. Kind of difficult to give advice how to make it.
How to make that happen? Well, all I can suggest is that wherever possible, create these programs of more holistic economics and try and keep them within the main faculty, so that let students go to a traditional, Yale economics program, let them go to a proper one. And then let the students determine who should be supported. And that's the only way.
So maybe this little bit of sobering conclusion is that we still have a very long way to go.
We still have a long way to go.
On the other hand, we are kind of a few of optimists, I guess.
Plus, I think the thing is that, what changes universities are very slow to change. I mean, my university, Oxford, is 800 years old now, and Yale is 300 years old, so it clearly takes a slow evolution. And they like the turtles on Galapagos, but the risk is they understand that they might also die like that if they're not careful. So hopefully we need to keep reminding them of these examples. We want to be more evolutionary and less static.
Okay, so thank you very much for all the work you have done already, and also what you will undoubtedly keep doing.
Thanks everyone.